So this is a new class I haven't taught before, in which you guys bring your own games and we go over them. I love the idea of this class because it's important to be able to see what types of mistakes people are making who are slightly better than you or slightly weaker than you, rather than seeing what types of mistakes the elite grandmasters are making. Because obviously there's a lot of differences there, especially when you look at classical time control games. So the first game I'm going to look at, who submitted the English game? And what's your name?
Gabriel.
Gabriel. So we're going to look at Gabriel's English game. And you were playing white or black in this game. So you were playing white, so the English is your opening. My dad actually always used to play the English. He's a FIDE master. And Greg and I kind of went in the absolute opposite direction and played e4. And English is always one of the hardest openings to play against for me. And some of you guys might have the same type of problem. The problem playing against the English when you're black is if you play an opening where you can get into some move order tricks. And a lot of the most popular defenses against queen pawn don't really work that well against the English. One example is the Grunfeld. If you like to play the Grunfeld and your opponent plays the English, it's kind of annoying because you can't really play it. You can play for d5, but it's kind of a slightly different opening, where white has more options. They can throw in a little bit of a queen a4 check, and you're not really contesting the center in the exact same way. So that is why it doesn't quite work to play the Grunfeld against the English. You can play a quasi-Grunfeld, but it's not exactly the Grunfeld. And then another very popular opening, the Nimzo Indian, you also can't really play against the English, because in this position white can play, instead of d4, transposing to the Nimzo, they can play e4 instead. Is that what you do?
It depends, yeah.
But sometimes you do this thing. Yeah, I think this is kind of dangerous. Yeah. So in any case, one of the things I like about c4 is that when you're playing, especially at the non-professional level, it can confuse your opponents, because obviously you're spending most of your time against e4, because that's what you're getting most of the time. And then you're spending the second most time definitely on d4. And even if you see d4 almost as often as e4, you're still probably spending slightly more time on e4 because it's sharper, right? So if you had to choose between studying your Sicilian or your double king pawn versus your defense against d4, you might choose the e4 opening just because you don't want to get crushed. So I think it's a good choice for people who like positional chess starting out. Now, this is one of the openings where it really doesn't matter, luckily, for your opponent. If you play a Slav, then it's fine to play the Slav against the English. So you're in luck in that case. And who here has no transpositional difficulties against c4 because they play something like the Slav, or the Queen's Gambit Declined is also totally legit.
The Caro-Kann? Is the Caro-Kann?
Well, if you play the Caro-Kann, the problem is your opponent might not play e4 here. Like if they play e4, you're going to transpose into some kind of Panov, but if they play d4, then you really have to play the Slav. So if you play the Caro-Kann and the Slav, then you're all set. But if you only play the Slav and you don't play the Caro, you might have to study some other line specifically tailored for the English, like, of course, the classical e5, right? Obviously, you can just play that. But the only annoying thing with playing c4, e5 is that if your opponent plays knight f3 in the first move, you have to learn a totally different opening for that. You see, because knight f3 disallows e5, but next move they might play c4 anyway. So it's really an irritation. Because not like you can just play knight c6 and play e5 next, because then they could play e4, and I don't know, like, do you play this? Maybe, maybe not, probably not. So, I mean, if you play e5 here, you transpose to a main line. They could also play d4 here, and you probably don't play that. So it's tricky that when you're playing against c4, you also have to have something for knight f3, and they both have to work. So that's one of the biggest challenges. So I love the move e5, and I would play it, except that it would be like learning a whole new thing. And then if my opponent saw that I didn't play like d5 against knight f3, they could just say, oh, I'll just play knight f3 against her and try to get the same types of lines to avoid her e5. Does that make sense? So it can be really irritating. So instead, though, your opponent just played for this, and now you can you continue to just play something which has no theory in it really. Not, I mean, I don't know the theory. I'm sure, obviously, there's a little bit of theory in every opening, but I'm not really aware of this. So you just decide to fianchetto your queen's bishop and really play chess and get out of book, as they say. And the thing about this type of opening is that this double fianchetto, actually, I think a lot of great Georgian players, Georgia, the country, not the state, have played this kind of thing. And now, if he tries to hop in and attack f2, you can just simply play e3 or something like that, or even play something on, probably e3, right? Yeah, and that doesn't seem to lead to much. I mean, it creates some holes, but the time waste, it's not really worth it for him. So he just, instead he played knight c5. Okay, that's kind of an interesting move. He's just trying to get his bishop out, I suppose. Maybe consider taking on c4 at some moment as well.
Just d4 here work?
Well, if d4 in this position, I guess the problem is you're cutting off your own bishop here.
Yeah.
But it would still, did you consider d4 here?
I think that's why I didn't, because I didn't want to block off the bishop.
And also he just has this nice
And I
square.
would kick out the
Yeah.
knight.
Yeah.
Well, you go knight there.
It's not terrible, but it doesn't look very harmonious for white either. It just feels like this bishop feels a little strange, and we really need to get castled.
Yeah, okay.
So instead he just played d3. That seems good. So now you play knight d2 instead of bishop g2. I guess next move you're going to play bishop g2.
I like, that was another thing, whenever, because they capture that, I like dropping a knight outpost in either c4 or yeah, so when they hit there. And also to reinforce f2, just after just in case, but since he captured.
So now you played bishop g2. And I like your position here. What did you think?
I like it, and I'm ready to castle, my rook's connected, and all my pieces are ready to go. And no weaknesses in the pawn structure, I can that.
I like your shit.
So what if you play knight e5 right away here? Because now you're actually attacking this knight and you're attacking this bishop. Well, yeah, so knight e5, my idea is I want to take a bishop off. The position's opening up a little bit, so I like the two bishops. So what does he do here? He obviously has to either take on f3 or just move this guy immediately. I'm not sure what's best. There's also some potential tactical things going on here. I don't think they quite work, though.
If it takes the bishop.
Well, I was trying to take on c6, but that doesn't work because you can still drop back with the knight for the moment, right?
Okay, white attack the bishop. Where's the bishop going? G4.
With what? Just play h3?
Yeah.
And then just I'll play bishop h5.
Okay, then G4.
Yeah, just here.
And now knight takes.
Yeah, well, sure, you could do that too, but I was just I'm not sure that you want to. You could just take the bishop immediately if you want. Also, you could just go here like right now, and then after this, just kind of develop normally. Bishop g2 or something like that. It seems like a kind of nice. Well, yeah, nice edge for white because also this knight is really awkwardly placed on e6. Probably not the best choice. It was just like a random choice I made. I think knight d7 makes a lot more sense. Seems more harmonious, right? But still, definitely some advantage to white here.
Yeah, I like that one. I would opt to take out that bishop, so then I have the two bishops on the diagonals.
Yeah.
And castles.
Yeah.
The queen's on the half open spot.
Yeah. And you can still maybe consider expanding sometime at some point with b4 and b5, you know, once you get your bishop to g2. Just kind of reconfigure things a little bit and try to go for that minority attack where you're pushing the b and the a pawns forward. Definitely like white.
Jen, can you go back before knight to e5?
Uh-huh.
How did you come? You just look, oh, if I move the knight on c5 is unprotected, attacking the queen. I mean, that was just what you saw right away.
Yeah, whenever there's an unprotected piece, I always kind of like put my alert bells up. They say loose pieces drop off. That's the cheesy little tactic mnemonic that a famous book by Motwani coined some time ago. And yeah, there's just sometimes it's positional though, right? It's not like you're actually winning material with knight e5, but that's still being aware of those loose pieces often creates some tactical opportunities. And I mean, I would look at other moves too. You can also look at knight e3. Seems kind of similar though, right? Except now you're allowing bishop takes f3, hurting your pawn structure. So that would be bad actually. So knight e5 seems better. And then there's no moves that actually win material, right? So yeah, I don't really see anything better. Yeah. All right.
What about takes the knight first? If you take with the bishop, takes the knight on.
F3?
No. Go back. Bishop takes the knight on
F6?
And then you move your knight there. You're attacking both pieces, and how do you defend it?
Yeah, that's a good question. But first of all, if you wanted to, you could take with this, and then this is protected by the bishop.
But if you move your knight to
E3. But then first of all, it's no longer in take. But even if it wasn't, even if for some reason I took with this pawn, which I don't know if I would do that, but even so, after knight e3, bishop takes f3 is also an in-between move because it hits the bishop on h1. So even in this line, this would be kind of bad for white actually, because then after pawn takes, we move the knight, and this structure is exactly the opposite of the structure we had earlier, where it was kind of pristine, right? So instead, you just played bishop g2. And then you played h6. Well, now you still have the opportunity to play knight e5, right? So this still works, and it's actually getting better all the time because in this, I hope I didn't overwrite the game. If so, I'd be very mad. I think Control Z or something works. But after knight d7 now, every little thing changes a little bit, and I feel like things are getting even better because now, like, you've wasted a move with this. Sometimes I'm even trying to like play bishop h3, but I don't think it does much. Just castle, and you're just really behind in development. So instead, you just castled. And then, wait, yeah, it does change something. I knew it was something bigger than that. What about, maybe it's not that big of a deal, but I'm looking at knight e3 now. And now you can't actually move the knight. Well, you might still be able to, but it's starting to get really messy whether it's something like this works. You can still take with a knight, and I guess you're covered. I was just looking at weird stuff like bishop takes f3 and bishop takes e7, just trying to desperado snag one pawn. But it seems like black can hold on there anyway. Still a good line, but nothing like winning or anything like that. So castles is what you did, and now he played e6, finally protecting that knight. And then you went with the other knight to e5. I guess you were kind of feeling this knight here. Okay. And then he played bishop f5. All right, so there's like some sacrificial possibilities here. I'm sure you're starting to analyze what happens after knight takes c6, right? But what do you guys think of it? Obviously, you always have to look at this kind of stuff because you're getting 2 pawns and a rook for a knight and a bishop. You'd have to put one of these knights here. Which one? Probably this one. And now, what's the prognosis here? What do you guys think? How many people think this is a bad idea for white? How many people think it's a good idea for white?
Potential could try and capture the knight at f6.
Yeah, I mean, to me,
Bishop, and
you.
then either draw the queen off or compromise the king side.
I mean, I think you've got the right idea here. I'll say is that if all we have here is to take on a8, it's not a good idea for white because even though like materially we got 2 pawns, we've given away our beautiful bishop, and now you've actually got some counterplay in the light squares rather than before when we were dominating the light squares. And yet, I would still look at this. So this variation I just don't like, and it's not a matter of calculation anymore. It's okay, our opponent's going to play bishop e7 and castle. Like, there's really nothing more to calculate. It's all a matter of feel. you've got 7 pawns versus 5 pawns. So that's technically a 2-point advantage, plus the exchange is another 2 points. But I'd still prefer. I don't even think in these terms of points really, so it's like kind of hard to add it all up. But I just look at this queen in the diagonal and I just really miss my old friend. I miss my friend a lot. That bishop on g2. That's why we play the English, right? I mean, I don't play the English, but I play the dragon, so I feel your pain if you play this variation. But I would still look at this because it's one of those things. Your king's still in the center. I want to look at this because what if there's a tactic, right? And then there's almost a tactic, but I don't see anything that really drives the knife in. Like, I'm looking at it, all these forcing lines, e4. First of all, you have bishop h3, which is kind of a problem. But even if you go back, e5 just doesn't really seem to lead to that much, because I don't have any way to put more pressure in this, right? And your other idea, bishop takes f6, the problem is now you've given up your other powerful bishop. And although if I take with a queen, that's bad news, what if I just take with a pawn? Sure, it's not ideal for the castled position, but if you're giving up all your minor pieces, then my king safety is not going to be as paramount anyway, right? So, yeah. I think that I would pass. But always look, because you never know. What if your opponent does something, I mean, just for the sake of argument, like, it's never really a massive waste to look at a line like that, because what if you play just something chill like this, and then your opponent does like that? Like, it looks like a terrible move, but just for the sake of argument. Now, suddenly, maybe things have changed a little bit, because now they can't move with this knight because of that. And if they move with this, now we do have this again now, right? Because after queen takes, bishop takes a8, we're actually winning material. And maybe we're winning even more material if we just take on d7. Well, if we take on d7 immediately, your king has to take, which doesn't look fun. But which one's better? It's like, well, something is good here, that's for sure. So that's kind of an artificial example because g5 is a terrible move. But that kind of thing happens all the time. You check out a tactical variation, it doesn't work. 3 moves later, you saved yourself a ton of work, because the same tactic arises, but now there's a little thing your opponent did that makes it winning, right? So never think of time spent analyzing tactics as a total waste of time. As long as you don't actually get into trouble on the clock, it could come in handy later. Okay, yeah. I like making terrible moves to make arguments. Okay, b4 instead. And then after knight d7, you just took. And now you played a3. Okay, so you've got that idea where you want to go for the minority attack. Okay, I approve of that. Your opponent played rook c8, played rook c1, queen g5, and he's having trouble developing because the g7 pawn was in take. So now by playing queen g5, he's finally ready to develop his bishop on f8. And just the looks really...
Can you go back a move?
Yeah.
Well, what if instead of rook to c1, you play rook to c1?
Mm-hmm.
What if bishop takes g7? Does that work?
That's a good question. That's just similar to what we were just looking at, where you're getting a pawn and a... But here, you're giving up the knight and the bishop for the exchange. But here also note that your rook on a1's hanging at the end of the variation. And you're only getting 1 pawn. So after king f8, knight c8, I think this doesn't look like it's going to go well for you. I mean, honestly, I'm so partial to these bishops. I hesitate to even take this, but I think it's probably good. And then after rook a1, queen c8, and I'm up a piece, right, for a pawn. Just not nearly enough compensation. I tell you, just my dragon, though, even though it's the best move, it seems, it's hard for me to even in analysis go bishop takes a1 there. Because the bishop is just such a spectacular defender and attacker, right? But still, rooks are good. Yes?
I've seen a couple examples, Pat, where they showed an analysis, instead of the bishop taking the rook, he centralizes the bishop and has a better attack.
Yeah,
It
but
makes their games.
we're just getting so simplified that even though it feels painful, it is probably better to take the rooks, because the more you get simplified, the more the rooks shine. And that's why you see a lot of exchange sacrifices in the opening in the middle game, because in the middle game in attacks in the king, minor pieces, knights and bishops, are just as strong as rooks. But in the end game, it's like there's no contest. The rooks just crush. So you see a lot of those sacrifices earlier. Anyway, very interesting, good tactical eye that you're looking for those loose pieces, but it's not working. And then instead, rook c1. Although rook c1, honestly, when you said something besides rook c1, I also jumped out at me because black's still 3 moves from castling. Rook c1 seems really slow to me. Like, I kind of want to break things open somehow. I'm more of an e4 player, so it doesn't come as naturally to me, but in general, like I'm looking for ways to break open the position here. Even a3 pains me a bit, but I guess you kind of want to defend b4. Not that you even really need to, because g7 is in take, but I'm just like thinking, what if we just start going for it here? Like e4 and like try to play f4 also. And you're having trouble defending. Like, you can't move this bishop because of this pawn. You see great d4 players go for these types of attacks a lot. And since I'm more of an e4 player, I don't do it as much, but I love the fact that e4 players think they're the aggressive ones, but then d4 players are actually sometimes the ones that get these awesome attacks because they have usually more center pawns to work with, right? I don't know, this looks actually really good for white to me.
I like that. It's not, it's one of the things that we're trying to work on, because I love positional chess, and I much prefer defense and counterattacking. So, like pawn pushes and being aggressive and forming an attack, like these are things, they don't occur to me, or I guess because I'm normally fairly cautious player or something like that. Do I want to open up my things like that? And then.
Well, that's an interesting point, because what you're saying is that you don't like consider these moves as much because you don't want to weaken yourself. And also, there's something to be said for the fact that the English opening, usually you're playing on the queen side. But what I tell a lot of my students is that, and this is one of the reasons why it's great to look at games of your peers or slightly stronger players and not only the great 2700s, because when you look at the games of the greats, they play the opening so well that usually, if you're playing the English, you do play on the queen side because your opponent is playing logically. Your opponent in this game did not play as well. His development is very poor. And when your opponent doesn't play as well, that's when you deviate from the theory, and not just the theory, but even the general ideas in the opening. Like, you're able to expand from the theory because your opponent played poorly and play more aggressively. It's very logical, right? They make mistakes, so you get to play more aggressively. That's all there is to it. And here, I don't like black's position at all. I think this is actually a really strong looking attack to me. Even though I feel your pain about this pawn becoming weak, I don't see how they can develop. I mean, what, they're going to play rook g8? I guess they have to try to play like f6, and it just look awful, right?
Is it white's move here?
It's black's move. I mean, they have to figure out a way to develop and defend this pawn. That's why your opponent ended up playing queen g5. So the nice thing is that this protects that.
Yeah, e5 is pretty weak, right?
E5, the problem is it loses a pawn, right?
No, I'm just saying the square, e5 square is weak.
Yeah. So we can actually play f5 next, maybe, and try to like really crack things open with the king in the middle. It's logical. You want to open up the position when your opponent's king is in the center. And I like the person who mentioned bishop takes g7, even though it's not good, because I think what it is there's this feeling that the position is rook c1's too slow for this position. Like you get this gut feeling. Their king is in the center. They've got 4 moves to castle. You got to develop your gut where you say, no way am I playing a slow move here. At least I'm going to look for the aggressive moves. All right, so rook a-c1, queen g5. Queen g5 seems kind of weird. Like, I understand this point that he's trying to defend g7, but again, I'm not sure about this queen maneuver here. That seems a little awkward. Again, I would think about a move like f4. You should look at games from some really good d4 players. Like, they don't have to be like the best in the world, but like even like some people who come to the club, like you've got Ben Feingold and Yasser Seirawan and Irina Krush. Look at some of their attacking games. These guys are not just winning every game playing rook b1 and b5, b4. They're also checkmating their opponents, and it's hard to play against a strong d4 player who knows how This is when a d4 player gets excited, or c4 player, when they're able to like start just like pushing their center forward like that. But yeah, like if you play f4, what are they going to do here? The queen is like in trapping territory. Like if they play like this or something, I feel like they're going to get trapped. Maybe not immediately, but it feels dangerous. I guess they always have g6.
Bishop F3.
Well, yeah, bishop f3, queen g6, and then you're going to trap my bishop here, maybe?
Yeah,
I'm trying to maybe do this one first. Move order. And then like if they go here, I'm trying to self-mate your queen here. It looks like we're close to trapping territory now, knight e3. Now you're getting really low on squares. We're going to trap you one way or the other. I'm so close yet so far, right? Because now you've got b5 again. We need to like block and then trap the queen. It's a really cool position. Maybe something like f5 takes and bishop f3. Now then you got queen g5. Well, regardless, this position looks absolutely terrible for black. So one way or the other, the game will be won. f4, queen g4 just looks awful. Queen g6. I mean, it doesn't really matter what you do. We're going to start expanding, right? Like if you play queen g6, we'll play e4 here. And it looks like in this position your bishop actually is getting trapped, right? And yeah, you can get a little bit of compensation, but it's not going to be sufficient. So yeah, I think you need to go for something like that. Queen c3 instead, h5. All right, well, I guess that helps him a bit because now if you play f4 or something, he can at least go to h6. Queen d4. Yeah, these queen maneuvers are not really helping that much here. What's that?
He's going to win a pawn.
Yeah, okay, he's going to win the pawn there, huh? And then you finally played e4 here. Well, you played e4 now. Okay, still probably good. I still think this position should be good for you. It's just illogical, like that his position should be good because he's got so little development and he's still not castled. So I don't believe in his position here. Well, this is kind of cool for those of you who are studying tactics trainer. What does white do? Better. Although bishop f3 might be really good too, but there's just a immediate.
Queen takes d7.
Yeah, queen takes d7.
Yeah.
Winning a piece, right? So always looking at that kind of tactical idea. Those are the types of things that are, if you look at tactics book, they come up all the time. So if you practice that, you will get better at seeing them.
I think what's so hard about seeing that, I'll see them like laterally, but when the king and queen are that far apart on the board, it's hard for me just to see that knight just.
Well, the thing is, the good players, what they do is they actually, first of all, the queen is loose, which helps make it more possible. But then literally, strong players do have these computer eyes, as we call them, in this great book, Forcing Moves, where they talk about how strong players play better tactically. Computer eyes means that on some level, you look at every capture. Most of them, it's like a millisecond. You're not really looking at it. You're not giving it your full attention because it's obviously bad, right? Like, I'm not really looking at queen takes g7. But most captures, you're giving it that second of respect. Queen a7, queen d7. And that's how you find the great sacrifices. So it's much more prosaic than, oh, they see it right away. No, they actually are looking at everything.
And you see that queen loose, and once again, it's the same idea, boom.
Yeah. There was a famous chess player who said like that he looks at first, when he sees a chess position, first he looks at all the queen sacrifices, then all the rook sacrifices, then all the bishop sacrifices, then all the normal moves. So he actually goes through all of them. But that process might take a total of 30 seconds. But he still does it, 30 seconds because some of them might just be so obviously wrong, right? Okay, so queen d7 would have been good, but this position is theoretical anyway. But I was talking about how f4 is a nice move again. Still, I'm partial to f4. He probably has to go to h5 or g6. And now, of course, queen d7 is not as good because after knight e5 check, the queen's protected, so it's just a trade. And not clear that you want to trade. One of the biggest benchmarks for whether or not you want to trade queens is whether or not your king or his king is safer. And here it seems that even though it's not as clear as before because your opponent has gotten a little bit of headway with the h-pawn, it seems pretty clear that black's king in far graver danger, right? So, any case, you did not play that? Oh, you did play e4. You did not play f4. You played knight d6 check. Yeah, knight d6 check, I'm not sure if it's good or not. I have to give it a little bit more individual attention, but my first gut is I don't love the fact that you're solving a problem that he's had for a while, but you might have a good follow-up to it, so I don't want to hate on it yet because he can't castle. I mean, he might be able to, and queen e7 seems insufficient because then he's going to lose the g7 pawn.
Jen, I like f4 too, but what if he just takes on a7? And I'm gonna
In this position?
yeah.
That might be decent too. I mean, it's not like it's not certainly what like
Take all your pawns.
jumps to my mind, but yeah, like just start taking pawns doesn't look bad to me.
I hate it when it happens to me.
Because he has no attack really. The problem, I mean, like yeah, sure he can take here, and I don't even think like it's a problem to take with this pawn. Like even leaving the h, even if we give him a bunch of moves, like let's say
I just move my rook from.
first of all you can just take here, but then exactly right. Like even if we don't take on b7, let's just say we play a dummy move. Even worst case scenario, we don't take there. And queen h5, you just move your rook, and this goes to show the beautiful defensive powers of this bishop. That actually this queen on h2 doesn't do a whole lot. I mean, you really would need to get your bishop on h3 to cause any headway, and that doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. Now, that being said, obviously, I'd still probably prefer to avoid this, but even if they get their queen to h2, it's still not a big issue. And meanwhile, you're going to be snapping off all their pawns. So, yeah, queen a7, greedy, but seems also reasonable. So, I mean, more than reasonable, like probably just also white, it looks very, very good. So knight d6 instead, and after bishop takes d6, queen d6 takes on g3. Take back with the f-pawn. Okay, it's hard for me to imagine this isn't still very good for you. Okay, rook d8. Okay, queen f4, yeah. That might be where things start to go awry a little bit because I still think your king is safer than his, so when you trade queens, I'm not sure that's going to be good for you.
Were you looking to win the g7 pawn by trading queens?
Right here.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I realized this was the exchange and I wanted to double up my rooks there. I was debating between this one or bringing the queen back to c7 to attack those pawns.
Yeah, I like queen c7.
That was the other line I was going through.
And you just thought like eventually I mean what's the problem here? Like if he castles, yeah, I think you can just start taking pawns off. His position just looks like this bishop still looks absolutely terrible. And his coordination is woeful, and you're going to snap off one more pawn.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I was realizing. Yeah, I should have went with that line instead.
Yeah, the problem is your queen's actually very powerful on d6. I think you're starting to feel a little bit of heat because the rook is on the same file as the queen, which in general is true that you need to watch out, but here it's actually kind of irrelevant because, I mean, first of all, you can just move the queen, and even if you didn't, this knight doesn't have any good discoveries. So, yeah, queen f4. A lot of times mistakes in chess are made because we don't look at all the captures and checks, but another big place where mistakes are made are in evaluations of captures. The reason for that is when we evaluate a capture, sometimes we let our emotions and general principles get in the way, things that we heard,
Man, you did bad.
like two bishops are good at an endgame, and like it just kind of gets in your head, and you don't think fully objectively. And also, captures in chess is when the stakes are high. So therefore, when there's a queen trade, always slow down and try to think with both brains. In that, I want you to think calculating, but also try to really bring out your more verbal, strategic, positional brain when you're talking about a trade of queens. because that's what sometimes gets lost.
How do you do that?
Well, you start thinking like, whose king is safer? Do I want to trade queens in this position? Do I have a better chance to attack more than them? Because those are not things that you can always describe very quickly in a variation. Like if you're just calculating, you're just like looking 5 moves ahead. You're not necessarily thinking about all those things. And in a queen trade, you really got to look at all the longer term factors.
That's one of my weaknesses I'm trying to work on. Like the games I've been losing, I'm calculating, I'm going through the different variations, and then I realized when I go with a particular variation, it was, and I remember this from last time, said the importance of move order, especially in captures. And the variation, it makes me so mad because I didn't see like the one variation where they captured in a different order, and it totally messes everything up.
Yeah, move order is really massive in tacticals. So yeah, I think that this was the first time in the game. I still think you have an edge, but it's the first time where I don't think it's like a massive edge. I still think you have an edge. I'm trying to think how big it is. It's hard to tell. I think it depends on how much counterplay they get against this pawn on d3. But this rook g4 looks kind of weird, but I guess you're threatening g7, so that's why you did it. He played f6.
Is E5 better?
Hmm?
Is E5
Black playing e5 instead. It looks a little better, yeah. And if I'm white here, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I'm trying to think. I want to try to get things out here. I feel like I should be doing well as white, but I'm not totally sure how to proceed. Maybe a4 or something.
Jim, did he hurt himself by trading the queen's net off with the attack and the king still not
Well,
casting?
yeah, and plus the queen on d6 was pretty strong. Like it could just go to c7 and start bumping pawns off. That was another problem. It was actually partly that the queen was really strong, so you didn't want to trade it.
Ideally, I would have left it there because he couldn't castle, but then I can't retreat back to c5 because
But
I guess he'd have to move.
I might go with this plan here, something like with a4. Another thing that we might want to think about is trying to get d4 in at some point, and then just play d5. And then it's true, just to try to really highlight our bishops. Like say they play a6. I don't know what they play here. The problem is their position is very passive, like knight f6 or something maybe. Yeah, probably knight f6.
Right here, I prefer sack.
And now what? You can certainly consider playing d5 here. Might be good. Take, and then bishop f6, pawn f6. Yeah. We've transitioned a little bit. We've traded a lot, but this pawn looks pretty weak. I don't know though. I would like something maybe a little bit clearer, but that's definitely something you can think of. That's like a worst case scenario that you're going to get like a slightly better position where you trade off a bunch of stuff and you're going to be a little bit on top. Maybe you can find something even better, but I still like the game for you. Rook g4, f6 is what you did. And now here I'd still consider playing d4 because now there's some benefits actually. Because if he tries to play e5, you can just go d5 straight away. So instead, you played rook f1. So you're kind of shuffling around here, and he got a little bit coordinated as a result. Now he played rook g4, threatening something on f6.
In theory, he told me, I know I could take the pawn f6, but my d3 is hanging as well, so.
Yeah, so it's not that clear.
I didn't want to. Oh, well, I didn't see the rook time.
Oh, you didn't see it, okay. But it's like,
He told me afterwards, he said, you could pick up that pawn. And I realized, it's like, oh, well, even if I could, I probably wouldn't.
yeah. Yeah, things kind of improved for him a lot in this position. He's kind of coordinated his pieces, and now what looks like he managed to actually get a little bit of a grip on that d3 pawn, which didn't really ever have to happen. So then you found this variation with bishop b5, and he had to sacrifice in exchange, but it didn't end up seeming so bad, did it? Because you're,
My books are out of position.
yeah.
My king-
Rook d3, not a good blockader. And your rook on g4 is like totally trapped.
I know, I realized that.
And you can still take on f6. Although now he can maybe take on e4. Yeah, that is a bit of annoyance that he can take on e4. Although, yeah, in rook e6 he has bishop f5. Mess, mess, mess. Yeah. Right, so you see that now if rook e4, pawn takes f6. Ugh. Huh.
And I was afraid of the D pawn, that's why, because one of my games I lost to him is because he had a pass pawn, so.
So now you're trying to get your rook out this way.
um,
Well, at least you got your rook out somehow. I guess I would try to, like, now this seems like an achievement to me, so I try to like play here and
I
see
should try to bring it out.
see if I can wiggle it around the other way. And
Because it was effectively cut off there.
but this pawn is always hanging, huh? You don't want to lose that pawn. But if you move your rook over here, then I guess you're concerned.
Centralizing the king.
That's what he did, but the problem was, okay, so he did centralize the king. He played king f1. You mean king f2?
Yeah.
Well, I think the problem is he's going to get checked here. And then this rook's going to have a lot of play. But you want to just play like king f3 here?
Right.
Yeah, that's probably better than the game. Let's see. Knight c4. It's really annoying, this rook placement. Because now we're threatening knight d2 check. And taking on e4, or just taking on a3. Yeah, you're always looking for those pawns. I like it. That's very good. Yeah, I don't like it. It's a good position because it's very instructive actually that you want to get those frontal attacks with the rook are often effective in the middle game. In my commentary broadcast, I often call them rovers for rook up and over. But in the end game, a rover is usually terrible actually because it keeps your rook away from the files that you need to control. And this is a good demonstration out of it that your rook is a really bad participant in the action here. So I guess, wait, what happened? No, this didn't happen.
Might you consider trading off the rook for the bishop?
Probably would have been better than, yeah.
How can you do that? This is what happened, right?
Yeah, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're just going to lose for sure when you take on d4, I guess, but I don't see, I probably wouldn't, I wouldn't take on d4, I'd make them work for it here, but it's not going to be easy.
Oh, yeah, that was a desperation.
Yeah, I don't think you need to do that yet, but it's looking grim. I'd still, just because I want to get that rook into the game, but then you get to take on e4, which is such a key pawn. That's a problem. And knight e4 with the idea knight d2 check is coming, so I don't think you can save the pawn on e4. So you kind of have to just give it away, I guess. Probably I would do this. It looks really grim, but I still think you have a better chance of fighting here than you do if you just give up the bishop. Anyway, a pretty instructive game. I'm glad you submitted it because there were a lot of positional things that we learned, I think. And an important concept for those of you who play d4 or c4 that it's not just a queenside opening, that there are a lot of attacks that generate from pushing those pawns forward. And a lot of d4 openings, you see our opponents trying to get f3 in at the right moment so that they can play e4. Right? Now this is not a d4 opening, it's a c4 opening, but we saw kind of similar principles. So playing one c4 is not an excuse not to attack. That's the key. Every opening, whether you play e4, d4, c4, the most aggressive or the most tame opening, there's always going to be moments where you have to execute the skill that comes less naturally to you. And the best players are universal and are good at both things, attacking and chilling out and doing nothing, which I feel like are kind of opposite poles, right? Chilling out and doing what seems like nothing but actually slightly improves your position. And it seems like that was what you're good at, which is usually the opposite. Most amateur players, when they get into chess, they come to it because they love to attack. So you kind of have a leg up on people that you actually like that aspect of the game. But develop both sides.